Hello and welcome to this special episode on Hull KR TV. I'm joined by Hull KR Head of Youth, John Bastian. John, great to see you. First of all, how have you been throughout the last year or so and the pandemic?
Been okay, to be fair. I think it's obviously it was a big shock to everybody. You know, when the pandemic, struck, and I don't think many people knew what to expect, and maybe we thought it'd be all over and done within 2 or 3 months. And over that period of time, I think everybody's had to be very adaptable. But in general, I think we got through it okay. And from a rugby perspective, stayed in touch with all the staff, especially within the academy, from week to week, and also the external staff, senior management, etc. And just adapted, to a new way of life for a period of time, knowing that sooner or later we'd get back to rugby league and we'd get back to doing what we love best.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're not too far off normality now, John. We're going to touch on your role, but first of all, for people of a certain age, they actually remember you as a player. So how did you first get involved in rugby league? What was your background? What was your amateur clubs and that kind of thing?
Well, I think I was born into it a fair bit, to be fair. I'm from Kirkstall Road, in Leeds, which is obviously at the foot of Headingley Stadium. It's a really stronghold, for rugby league. My dad, he were a professional rugby league player with Bramley Rugby League Club. My uncle, he played for Bramley Rugby League Club, and Castleford. Back in the 80s. So you're sort of surrounded by it, and everybody in the area were associated, with rugby league and probably football as well. But it were never my first passion. My first passion were always football. And as young kids, growing up on an estate, the streets were the biggest playground ever. And from early morning, till dusk, we'd be out there, playing football, different sports, maybe climbing trees and doing a few bits and bobs that we shouldn't be doing. But that's how I got introduced to sport, being out on the street and being around a load of lads, and a few girls that joined in as well. And we had a great time, enjoyed it. Rugby league came a bit later, and there was an association with the Milford, amateur rugby league club, because my daddy, obviously, when he left Bramley, he did a bit of playing there, and probably through lots of dislocations of his shoulder, he had to stop a little bit earlier than what he wanted to, and he started coaching, the senior side down at Milford, and I used to go as a little kid, watching the games, watching some of the training, and it probably stemmed from there. But again, football really was my passion, and I was fortunate enough to play for Leeds City Boys at football, which were a pretty good standard then, and I did that for just short of 3 years, and we had a great school team, and rugby was it played second fiddle. And then I did start playing a bit for Milford and a bit of rugby union for a team called West Park Bramham up in Leeds, and eventually I said, right, I'm going to have a real go at this. And when I was about 17, I started to make a commitment to rugby league, and it was a tough learning process there, because I started playing a lot of open age rugby, and it were the Leeds Sunday League then, and I started there with a guy called Mally Rosenthal, who were terrific, and then progressed at Milford's second team, and eventually got into the first team, and had some really good coaches, at the time. Maurice Bamford, he coached us for a while, the Great Britain coach, a smashing coach called Don Ellis, who were terrific again with us, and how we knew how to, bring you out of a game, if it were getting a little bit too much for you and it were a bit too challenging, and he'd rest you, and then he'd put you back in week after, and he'd grow you slowly, and you learn lots from that. Probably further down the track I've learnt from that, when you reflect and look back on your career. And the other one was, a big one was Alan Agar. Wow. Alan Agar came into Milford Club, and he changed things. He were ahead of his time, and he made us focus, a lot harder you know, on the little things that were important, you know, to the game, that, you know, we needed to look after ourselves really well. You know, we needed to train to an higher standard if we wanted to be, you know, the national champions, and that's exactly what we did. You know, he was a tough taskmaster as well. He put me in my place plenty of times, and for the right reasons as well. I didn't like it at the time, but what he did was correct. And again, the more you look back, the more you reflect, the more you learn and understand why he did that. Wasn't particularly pleased at the time, but Alan knows, and I've spoke to him since, you know, and his son, obviously Richard, who I'm good mates with. I have a better understanding of what he did for me at that particular time, and the other lads in the team, because we were a young team, and he took us on, you know, to be national champions, which were a great feat, you know, for the amateur club at Milford, and that's how it started. And then obviously you start to get, you know, a bit of interest, you know, from the professional clubs, and you got to keep your feet on ground. And I had an opportunity with Bradford Northern then, and I'll never forget it. The scout came to watch me, and he were all ready for, you know, pushing the directors at Bradford to sign me, and we had a Leeds and District game, and we were playing Hull. Ironically, I'm not sure if it were Humberside and District then, or it was their regional team, and it were always going to be a tough game. We were playing at Buzzvale in Leeds, and I made a big mistake, and I went out and had a few beers on Friday night, and I was poor. I played poor in that game, and I missed an opportunity there, and again, paid a price. Fortunately, there were still a couple of teams interested in me, and Featherstone, Peter Fox, he gave me a trial at Featherstone, and I was doing okay, to be fair, down at Milford. I think I just had my jaw broke in Cumbria in Egremont, and I was recovering from that, so I had to hold fire a little bit with the Featherstone. And when I got the opportunity, I went over there, and my dad drove me at the time. I wasn't driving, and it was strange, you know, going there, different environment, a little bit scary actually, you know, when you were, I think I was 21 maybe 22. So I developed nicely, you know, down at Milford, you know, through all the grades, and it was a good opportunity. But I was probably quite an home bird, you know, at Milford, and going over to Featherstone, you know, with all those senior players, it were a little bit daunting. Again, you're learning lots of lessons, you know, for the further down the track, and there were some quality players in there that had played at Wembley, and, you know, that had played international rugby. Peter Smith was the captain at the time, a terrific player, terrific bloke, and they were quite welcoming. And I can always remember going in, and I went into the first team changing room, and I got a real swift one. Trialist next door, young'un, off you go. And I just thought, geez, nice one, great start. Went next door, got changed, etc. Trained with lads. It were okay. They were all right. Hard bunch of blokes, a lot of miners, a lot of industry, you know, in and around, you know, Featherstone at the time. Went to car, and I said to my dad, I'm not sure I'll be going back there, Dad. He said, you will be. I said, nah. I said, oh. He said, listen, give it time. Best piece of advice I got. And I did go back, and I played a couple of games for the Alliance team, and Peter Fox offered me I think it was a 3-year deal, and I never looked back then. I had a terrific 4.5 years there. I should have done better. I think I did well, you know, and I played in top division, but I think if I'd have been a little bit maturer in areas, and I'd have listened a little bit better, I'd have done a lot more, you know, than I should have done.
What would you say were your best attributes as a player then, John?
I think, I were always a committed player. You know, I'd always put me. I were always competitive. I always wanted to win, and I think that was probably my biggest asset. I was a pretty good trainer as well. You know, when certainly when I was focused and I was really on it, and that I had a good engine, you know, and training wise I could say I was quite strong, you know, in that area. Now and again I needed a little nudge and a clip round here, and you know, and somebody just say, hey, come on, you know, lift your standards a little bit, and but I was quite responsive. I think the biggest thing was I was competitive, and I did not like losing, and I still don't, to be honest with you. I think a good loser, you know, accepts losing sometimes too easy. You got to be a respectful loser, but don't like losing. Want to win and want to be competitive, and there's a process, you know, obviously, you know, to go through to being a winner, you know, at the top end.
Of course, as well, we're talking pre-Super League, so if you went out onto the pitch, if you didn't win, the pay wasn't as good, was it?
Well, that was the big advantage. You know, at the time we were the majority. Well, at Featherstone, I think everybody were part-time players and working through the day. So you'd train maybe Tuesday, Thursday, do your team run Saturday, play Sunday. Some would do a bit extra in between. You know, but I was working for a building firm in Armley in Leeds called Firth Edwards, and again I really enjoyed that. And you'd start at 8. You know, you'd finish at 4:30, 5 o'clock. He were very supportive. You know, my boss, my owner, a guy called Andrew Kemp. He was terrific. You know, with the rugby, and he'd say, look, you know, just have half an hour, you know, for your dinner. He says, and get off a little bit early, you know, for your training, and then you do that. So you were very active. There was a little bit of travelling to Featherstone. I think the hardest thing was waking up on a Monday morning when you were as stiff as a board. But you're right what you're saying. The win bonus, whether it were 200 or 250, 300 £300, it were a lot of money then.
Yeah,
and believe you me, there were a little bit of contract money, not a great deal, you know, but that didn't have to top your weekly wage up.
What was it like coming to Craven Park or the Boulevard then as an opposition player back in those days? Because we've got a bit of a reputation in this city, haven't we, of being a little bit partisan and a little bit blinkered when it comes to the game of rugby league.
Well, I always loved coming to it was called Humberside at the time. Now it's obviously East Yorkshire, you know, and probably in Leeds we've always known it as, you know, East Yorkshire. But it were I always enjoyed coming here because it were always hard. You always knew you were going to get a really tough, hard game, whether that were at Westall, a team called Ace Amateurs were a really strong side. And I think the best side I ever played against in the amateur game, and I speak to some lads about it, were a team called Meissen. I've not played against a better amateur team than them. They were terrific. And one year we played them in Yorkshire Cup for Milford, and it were a cracking game. I think they won it. I think it might have been 24-6, 24-8, but it was just another level, you know, the standard. And again, whilst we lost that game and we were disappointed, we weren't happy at all. You know, we were a young side and we learnt so much, you know, from playing against a team of that quality with the experienced players, you know, that they had in the side. Then further down the track, you know, going to play at the likes of the Boulevard, you know, and the old Craven Park and the new Craven Park, it were a privilege because they were just terrific teams, hard teams, you know, quality teams with some quality coaches and international players. Both teams littered, and it were great. But the crowds were passionate. You know, the stadiums were pretty full. You know, you would have, you know, several thousand in each, you know, for them games. So it were always a good place to come, you know, with East Yorkshire, Hull, and it were always enjoyable, and the people were always hard but fair and pretty friendly after. They were all right.
Yeah, we're always okay as long as we win, yeah.
You've got to win.
Absolutely. Back in them days, obviously, overseas players were current internationals, not like now where they're all earning big money in Australia and they stay over there, don't they?
Yeah.
At the time, some really big names, Kurt Sorensen, the likes of,
Yeah.
What was it like coming up against some of those guys?
It were probably a bit of a dream come true, because you'd been right through the amateur, program. You'd done your development, and you're watching these guys on telly, playing against Wigan. And then within a 6-7 month period, we got promoted from Championship when we were at Featherstone. Then all of a sudden, we're playing against, world-class teams, and they were world-class as well. Wigan were the world champions, and I certainly think they went on to be world champions as well, did Widnes. But to play against them, again, were a great challenge, and it's about you being able to step up to that challenge. And it were a privilege as well. Some of the players that you actually came up against, and Kurt Sorensen was one of many. He was aggressive, he was competitive, he wanted to win. Whenever you played against the great Wigan side, you were up against absolute quality world-class players. And we were fortunate at the time that due to the off-season in Australia, we'd get a lot of Australian players and New Zealand players coming over and representing teams in the Stones, we were called Stones Premiership, Stones Bitter Premiership. And to play against them, Andrew Ettinghausen, Gavin Miller were a terrific player, Noel Cleal, Crusher, over at Hull FC. And that's just to name a few. The game were littered, with quality internationals, from overseas. And the game was strong over here as well. It were a really strong competition, and I think the easiest way to describe it, it were a dream come true, playing in front of the big crowds against some of the best players in the world. It was like, wow.
Just, you mentioned the great Wigan side, John. As a player, obviously, you've already mentioned you were part-time, you had a 9 to 5, and then you played on a weekend. Wigan were a full-time outfit, weren't they? And there was such a differential, and they used to just walk everything, didn't they? Was it hard as a player knowing you was going into a game with Wigan, knowing that on a good day you might just catch them out, but 8-9 times out of 10 they're going to give you a bit of a spanking?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, we had I think I played against Wigan maybe 4 times, maybe 4 or 5 times, and it were there were only once they caught us on the op. They were obviously, they had world class players, and there were players like I don't think there's been over here. I don't think there's been a better player than Ellery Hanley. I just think he was sensational. A sensational athlete and an outstanding player. Totally committed. To rugby league, and for me, he's quite iconic. For that period of time. But I think they were littered. Gene Miles were playing. At the time, and they had Andy Platt. He went on to be a world class forward. Dennis Betts. Went over and played for New Zealand Warriors. So they were littered. But I think if you rolled your sleeves up and you showed them, that you were going to be competitive and they're not going to just roll over you, it made a difference, and we did that, the majority of times. And I think we did. They always managed to pip us. They always had that little bit of class that came up with something. But we got them once in Premiership, in top 8 playoffs, and they finished top. We finished 8th. And that were a pretty good position, for Featherstone, and we managed to beat them, at Central Park, and that was special. But for me, it were great winning, and again, I'll emphasise it is important that you want to win games, but you also knew that you did have a disadvantage when you played against Wigan, because they were full time, they were littered with international players, and they were financially, a rich club. Yeah. They were a very wealthy club. Very well supported, they get 10,000-12,000, for most home games. And whilst we were a little bit smaller, we were still a well-run club, at Featherstone. And again, we had plenty of international players. Paul Newlove were coming through. Graham Stedman were an outstanding player.
Yeah.
Mentioned Pete Smith, Derek Fox. So we were okay, you know, and Peter Fox, you know, had recruited well, you know, and he'd got some players around them. You know, Carl Harrison were another quality player that went on to be an international. We were very competitive, and we did okay against them top teams. And we could actually, on our day, go to St Helens, you know, go to Hull, go to Wigan, go to Leeds and win games, and we did that against all them teams.
Was you in the same Featherstone side as Brendan Tutor?
Yeah, Brendan came.
He was a player.
Yeah, he was. Very aggressive,
Yeah.
very competitive, and he were. He's obviously, you know, he's still a very well thought of, you know, in Featherstone, you know, for the period of time, you know, that he spent there. But yeah, he were. He certainly. It was good to have him by his side when he played.
And I've mentioned, obviously, coming to the city of Hull and play. Featherstone's quite a unique place, isn't it? The fans are right on top. It's still the same to this day, isn't it? The fans are right on top of you. I'm sure the players can hear every swear word and every criticism.
Yeah, it were a great place to play. You know, like you said, you know, you'd be getting big crowds in there. You know, between you got 5, 6, 7, 8,000. Sometimes it went, you know, a little bit higher than that, you know, depending on who we were playing. But the atmosphere was terrific. You know, they were very passionate, you know, about the rugby league. You know, they were right behind you, especially if you put the effort in and you were committed, you know, to that shirt, to that team. They were very supportive like that. And it's steeped in culture. An industrial town, you know, that rugby league, you know, grew up from.
Yeah, I love visiting Featherstone. It's a great place. Castleford's kind of the same as well, isn't it? You know that. You know you're there. Let's put it that way. When you turn up at their place,
you do. Yeah, you're always going to have a tough game for sure.
So, at what point did you know it was kind of time to wind down as a player? Then, John, was it injury? Was it age? Was it? Like you said, you used to wake up on a Monday morning feeling battered and bruised. What point do you reach where you think, do you know what, I need to start thinking a little bit further afield now?
Well, I think I came up short. I came up short at Featherstone, you know, and I ended up moving on to Dewsbury, you know, for a short period of time, and I probably wasn't enjoying it as much. I was getting towards back end of my 20s then, and then I went back to Milford Club, and did a little bit down there, a little bit of playing down there, and then probably started to focus, you know, more on, you know, work, and started doing a little bit of junior coaching with a guy called Mick Loveday. We're doing under 18s. My brother, he played, you know, for that team, and I just started assisting him there, and I quite enjoyed it actually. And we had a really good year with the boys. You know, I think they won the league, and they won the Leeds and District Cup, and I think several of them got signed on. But it were really enjoyable, you know, putting something back into, you know, some young blokes, and it was great watching them, you know, progress. Even the ones that didn't quite, you know, make it to the professional game. You know, a lot of them stayed on and played amateur, and they enjoyed it. They enjoyed the rugby, and I think that's the key. You know, at whatever level, you know, you play at, you know, love what you're doing, you know, and enjoy your rugby. From there, I did another year with the under 18s that were coming up behind them at Milford Rugby League Club. And after that, I got an opportunity to go down to the famous Queen's Club. Now that were a big one, because when you're a Milford man, and you go to the Queen's, that's a big step, you know, down the road, because the Milford and the Queen's, the rivalry, yeah, it was terrific.
Queens have got a big reputation even here. All teams would go there knowing that not only was they going to play rugby, they was probably going to end up fighting them as well.
They were tough, and I can remember, you know, playing against them, you know, in community game, and you pretty much had a sleepless night, you know, prior, you know, especially the first one, I can remember it. And there were, my uncle, he played for Queen's, I was playing for Milford, and there were some brothers were playing, you know, for Queen's, some had played for Milford, and it were like, there were loads of cross-contamination, you know, of either friends, brothers, family, etc. But you knew when you played against them, it were on.
Yeah.
And they could play rugby as well, by the way. That team at that time were very strong. You know, Mick Cook were playing for them there. You know, the hooker, he was hard as nails. One of the best trainers, one of the best blokes I actually worked with at Leeds Rhinos as well. But when he played to win. Yeah. Andy Wilson,
I remember.
You know, went to Wakefield Trinity, terrific player. You know, and again, he was a Queen's man through and through.
Very quick, good footwork.
That's right. Yeah. So the standard were quite high, and if you remember back then, a lot of players, you know, signed on a little bit later. They were playing community rugby at open age, and some of them might sign on till they were 23, 4, maybe 5. You know, so they were getting a really good grounding, and but the derby games against the Queens, they were big games. They were tough games. So going from playing against them, then to coaching with them, and it was a really good mate of mine, a guy called Richard Milner, and Richard Milner played for Milford. He played for another local amateur side called George IV, and I went to school with Rich from when we were kids, right through primary school into middle school, and he went on to play at Halifax from the Milford, and he asked me, he said, do you fancy coming down and helping us out? And because he was head coach with Richard, but he played, so I started doing a fair bit of coaching for him, and it just freed him up a little bit, you know, when he was playing, because he was a terrific leader on the field with the players, as well as having a real big input, you know, when we were doing the training. But I right enjoyed it. It was a little bit frosty to start with from some of the players, and but we got there in the end. And it's one of the most enjoyable times I had, you know, coaching and being around a bunch of blokes. They were it was fantastic. It really was fantastic. We had some great success, some great times together, we had some laughs. And I think that's an important one, that, you know, that when you create an environment, you know, that has that winning culture, that has that hard work ethic, and everyone wants to improve and, you know, do them little things better, you know, enjoying it and enjoying each other's company is just as important. And we certainly had that down at Queen's for a fair few years. And
so did dipping your toe into the coaching at that point kind of fuel your fire which led you on the path to where you are now?
It did, yeah, it did, because from there, you know, there were a young junior side coming up through Leeds, and it were Milford. There were Milford started at under 12s or 11s at Milford, and there were some quality kids in there, some quality players, and they ended up, you know, controversially a little bit transferring across, you know, to Queen's, which again it upset a fair few people, but anyway, we've got to keep moving on. And there were some real quality players come out of that. You know, James Brown went on, you know, to he's still playing at Batley.
Yeah.
Jody Broughton, you know, Ben Jones Bishop, Michael McLaurin.
Wow.
You know, there were some quality kids, great to work with. But again, there were some really good kids, you know, that just enjoyed the rugby, you know, at community level. You know, Richard's lad, Johnny Milner, was a terrific player, but he loved playing community, so good luck to him.
Yeah.
You know, and there were lots like that, you know, that went on to have great careers in the community game and stayed in there. But the ones that wanted to progress and wanted to go to an higher level, they did, and they did particularly well. So getting into that cycle of working with lads that were 15, 16, again, really enjoyable. And off the back of that, then we started working for the Leeds service area. And the Leeds service area obviously like a representation of, you know, the Leeds and district area, you know, for lads that were 13, 14, 15, 16. And
at that age, John, when you're looking at kids that age, are you just looking at the talent, or do you have to kind of look at the character and how committed they would be, or is it too young to make a kind of an assessment?
It is, because they're obviously they're going to develop over many years at that age but you do make small judgments, definitely, and you have a look at them and you see what they're like personality wise, like you say, what are the characteristics like. We know they've got a certain amount of talent, and even if talent's average or below average, you can build it as long as the person that you're working with, he wants to challenge himself, he's ambitious, that he is competitive and he loves what he's doing and he enjoys what he's doing. If you get that combination right, and you get parents that aren't too pushy, and that support the lads, and let people get on with the jobs and just keep supporting them, I think it works. It works quite well.
Yeah, that strikes a chord with me, because I've interviewed a lot of former Rovers players, and there's one player I interviewed, and he spoke about himself as, at that age, he says, I wasn't the best player in the team. He says, I flew under the radar. He says, but what I always had was determination to stick at it and be the best that I could possibly be. And that player is Josh Hodgson, and look at him now.
Well.
And for him to admit, he wasn't the best at his age group, and he was perhaps, there were better players than him, but it's his determination and his commitment that got him to, well, he's probably the best hooker in the world now, isn't he? And having a fantastic time down under. He's
a quality player. And now, again, I worked with Josh, on the regional camps, and I think I worked with him with Yorkshire, and watching him come through, Hull FC. He was a smashing lad. He was enjoyable to work with, but again, he described himself as average. I'd say we're a little bit better than that, but his persistence, to want to achieve things, to want to be, a top line player, has paid off, and I think it's a great role model, for young players, to look at, watch, and say, where do you want to be? There's no excuses on that, to be honest with you.
And can that be recognised in a lad of 14, 15, that bloody mindedness?
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, you can see it. And I'll give you a little example. Of a player. And when I went to Featherstone, there were a young lad who kept turning up at an hour before scholarship training and says, "Oh, is it all right if I go in here and do some rowing? Do a little bit of bike?" And I says, "Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, you're welcome." And I said to Robin Sharp, who I've worked with a fair few years at Featherstone, at Bradford, and obviously he's with us at Hull Kingston Rovers, I said, "Who's that young man?" He said, "Oh, it's James Bentley."
Wow, yeah.
And I went, I said, he turns up a lot, doesn't he? He's got a lovely attitude. And he had a lovely way with him. Ironically, when I left Featherstone as the head coach, I went to Bradford as head of youth. James had transferred across there, to their last year scholarship. And obviously I spent a lot of time with him, and you can see why he's become who he's become. For any player, you really have got to buy into it. You've got to be passionate. You've got to love it, and there's no reason why average can't become good, good can't become very good, and that will happen if they keep going, and if they get themselves, to a real high-end fitness level, and they keep learning off the coaches, and the competitive, and they can handle, the physical side of the game and the competitive side of the game. And there's no reason why they can't achieve that. But they've got to be the ones that drive it. We give them, the tools to be able to advance, but they've got to be the ones that want to take themselves to that next level. No excuses on that one.
Is that how kind of you would, if you was asked to say, what's your job description, would you say you're a facilitator?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And if you can just help and support somebody, for them to progress and make it enjoyable as well. I think it's important, that the coaches, they show some compassion. They have an understanding of that individual, that person, who they're working with. Try, to give him the best opportunity, that they can for him, to advance. that makes a difference. But them coaches, they've got to be committed as well. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
You know, I was having a conversation with someone probably last week, you know, and I think I've had 2 holidays with my family in nearly 20 years. You know, my kids growing up, I hadn't seen a lot of that. And the holidays I had were out of season.
Yeah.
You know, not when we were in season. And there's a huge commitment there, you know, for any coach, you know, when he's working in a professional environment, that they need that, them kids. They need them standards, you know, that you set, and it is important, is that, yeah, for sure.
How frustrating can it be then on the flip side of what we've just discussed, where a lad comes through the door, you see him on the pitch and he's got all the natural talent in the world, he's got that touch of genius, that touch of class, but hasn't got the application outside and doesn't want to train and wants to go out with his mates, and that must be so frustrating, thinking you've got the world at your feet, just knuckle down, but it just doesn't happen.
I think you see that a fair bit. You see that a fair bit, and you probably you learn not to dwell on that, you know, because that's their choice. At the end of the day, you know, whilst you'll do your best to encourage them, you know, to find the talent that they have, to take it to another level, to work on certain characteristics that need strengthening. Ultimately, it's their choice on how far they want to go, and if it's not for them, well, again, they've got to be the ones that look in the mirror and accept, you know, that they made that decision, not John Bastian, or not the under-18s head coach or under-16s. That's their choice.
Yeah, you've got to be quite pragmatic, I suppose, haven't you? And you can only do so much. You can't drag someone along. They've got to have that level of commitment.
They have, you know. It's rugby league's tough. You know, the training. You know, whilst there's a lot of enjoyable training, there's a lot of smart training where they're learning. There's some intensity as well. You know, the training in regards to making sure the players are fit. You know, the endurance is a huge part now of the game. You know, any young players that are watching Super League, certainly the NRL's at another level. You know, the endurance and the commitment those players put into a competitive game for 80 minutes is pretty remarkable. You know, so the standards are going up. Yeah, they've got to be strong. You know, they've got to have a certain amount of speed. They've got to have good movement, good agility. There's so many little combinations that they have to have, you know, to make it to that next level. But it's achievable. It's achievable, you know. But because of, you know, how tough it can be, they've got to be the ones, you know, that drive it. They've got to be the ones, you know, that have got to be like Josh Hodgson, determined and ambitious to reach the top.
You've been with Kingston Rovers now since 2019, John. I know when people come into roles, they speak of 5-year plans, 3-year plans. Has the pandemic kind of jolted the progress of what you hoped would happen so far?
Yeah, it definitely has. You know, we can't hide from that. You know, I think we were 9 months in, and we were going well. And this isn't just Hull Kingston Rovers. All clubs will be suffering a little bit from this. You know, that 12-month period, you know, where the players have had no games. You know, they've had to basically do an home training programme. You know, certainly it'll set them back. You know, and it'll be tough for some players because they will miss out some on opportunities. You know, but we've got to accept that. You know, we've got to move on. We've started now, obviously, pre-season training again. You know, we've had some difficulties to overcome. There are red zones at Hull Kingston Rovers, you know, to protect the first grade. Fully understand that. We were training at the Marvel College on their G pitch. We haven't been able to go there, obviously, you know, because of COVID restrictions. The back pitches have been heavy, you know, with the rain. So we've had to be adaptable and do some training out here on, you know, the just on this concourse here.
That's
in front
pretty
of the
old
shop.
school, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But I'm not. I don't have a problem with that. To be honest with you, I think it's not a bad thing. We've still got some good little sessions in. It's not ideal. I think moving forward, I think any club that wants, to attract, whether that be world-class players or top juniors, they have got to have world-class facilities. And I think it's really important, that any club, including all Kingston Rovers, work towards that. It makes a big difference. It makes a big difference to development. It makes a big difference to attracting players. And it makes a big difference to outcomes as well. And if you look at probably the top two teams in Wigan Warriors and Leeds Rhinos, they have that. They have that. And it obviously they've got bigger talent pools. They've got big talent pools, but they provide, and they heavily invest as well financially, into youth to make a difference. It's not just the talent pool, it's the bigger picture. Making sure, that they can offer everything to them young players. And when we get to that standard, it's a different level then. It opens different doors, and it'll make a significant difference, to what we're doing with our youth. We're doing all right, we're in a good place, we can go to another level as well, and we will do as well as a club.
Yeah, you mentioned finances, and understandably a lot of clubs will look at the first team, and I'm not saying it's across the board, but some clubs will perhaps not invest in the youth programmes as heavily as others. Hull Kingston Rovers aren't one of the elite when it comes to cash streams in the Super League, we know that, but what we do have is a very strong fan base that will support the youth, and the Rovers supporters group, and in particular Keith Lyon and Adge Cutler have recently made a big commitment to your setup, haven't they, John?
They've been the RSG, the Rovers supporters group. Again, I think it's significant. And they can make a big difference, to what we're actually doing, with our juniors, and the commitment that they've shown already, is credit to them, and we know that we know it's the supporters that are backing them as well. The supporters, they make a difference. By backing the RSG can invest financially into the youth, and they've already done that, and I'm sure that'll get stronger, as we progress. But they're passionate about youth. They want to see young players, playing for Hull Kingston Rovers, not just sporadically, consistently, year in, year out, year in, year out. This is us. It's part of, our culture, that we're going to produce homegrown players, and when you've got a real passion for it, there's no reason, why this club, can't go to another level with youth development, and I fully expect them to do that as well over the next several years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the golden generation at Leeds, Sinfield, Barrow, Maguire, and the best period of this club's history was, probably between 1977 to 1986, and predominantly most of the squad were homegrown players. Mike Smith, Roy Holt, Stock, Steve Hartley, John Millington, Len Casey, Phil Lowe. It can't be overlooked, can it, the importance of developing local talent?
I think it's huge, I really do. I think it's huge because when you play for your hometown club, I think there's a little bit more goes into it, I'll be brutally honest with you. When you're out on that pitch and them fans, cheering you on, and you come from where they come from, it makes a significant difference.
I'm sure Adge and Keith will be watching this, John, and I know you've already spoken to them, but on behalf of yourself and the fan, thanks a lot, Adge and Keith. What you do is great, supporting John and the youth setup, and we know you just do great work. So anyone who's not an RSG member yet, this is the areas your money go to, and this guy's going to make it work for us. So, John, it's been great catching up with you. Good luck with the games to come, and and keeping all the young lads in shape, and we'll be watching that very closely.
Thank you very much. We'll be doing our very best.
Thank you.
Cheers.